Greetings, friends. Welcome to our program, broadcast from Iceland. And this is a very special occasion because I have a very special guest with me here today, and that is Miss Grace Collins. Grace is from the United States of America, and you live just close by Washington, in Washington, D.C. So welcome to the program. Lovely to see you here today. And we're going to be talking today together over many of the things that Grace has done in her life and what God has done since, of course, she was very small. Now, you were born in America, Grace, and your parents were from South Korea.
My mother was from South Korea, and my father actually escaped from North Korea.
Oh, is that so?
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, they went to America, and you are one of 3 children in the family, and now you are with us here in Iceland. Welcome. Your first trip, I think, to Iceland.
Yes, I mean, this is just an amazing opportunity to see such a beautiful country. The landscapes are just gorgeous. And I just want to preface that I came from a Christian family. Both my grandparents were pastors. And because they were pastors in Korea at the time, during the war, they were very much persecuted.
I'm sure.
And my grandmother was very famous because she fought against the Japanese occupation, and she was imprisoned. So we have a Girls' Scholarship Fund for Human Rights,
yes,
and a statue in her name. And my grandfather, on my father's side, my great uncle, he actually was one of the 7 that helped start South Korea when South Korea was not a nation, and he came with Syngman Rhee, the first president of Korea, and was one of the 7 delegates to the United Nations in San Francisco when the UN was in San Francisco.
Right.
So he represented a nation that was not a nation yet and talked about freedom.
Yes.
And today I will be talking about another nation that is looking for their independence some
right,
60 years later. And it's just funny how generationally you can have these mantles that are given to you,
yes,
without even knowing it, and you're born into it.
Yes, yes.
So I think that's a God divine intervention.
Yes.
And
well, let's just hear about how you came to faith, because you will have been brought up as a child in the Presbyterian Church in America, and then, of course, as you say, your heritage is that your grandparents were pastors. Your father was a businessman.
No, my father was a research physicist for Kodak.
Oh, right.
And my mother, though, she went to McCormick Theological Seminary School, which is UChicago. And
right,
she studied Christian education and worked for the YWCA as a social worker, and worked with the elderly. And church actually met in our house.
Really?
We were the first Koreans in Rochester, and my parents, when they became American citizens, they took their citizenship very, very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
They did not talk too much about their heritage and what they had fled from. And when they became Americans, they wanted to be the best Americans.
Right.
And they started church in their home,
yes,
Bible study, many, many years. Like I said, we were the first Koreans in Rochester. My father was the first Korean to work at Kodak, and he actually started the Korean American Association of Rochester. And it grew from just our family to, I think there's several thousands now in Rochester. And after many years of hosting Bible study in their home, they rented at a church, a Presbyterian church, and then 13 years later decided to start their own church.
mm-hmm,
And they built that church. That church is still in existence.
And that's in upstate New York,
Yes.
just north of New York City.
And then as my parents got older, I moved them to where I live, which is in Maryland. And that was because they were getting older and they
Right.
needed additional help.
Yes. And you have had the responsibility of caring for your parents. And of course, as we know, Asian people are very respectful of the elderly, and you do take care of your parents.
Part of it is a little bit guilt. Through this job, I had traveled quite a bit and hadn't been home for a while. And then my father got very ill with his first stroke. He had several strokes and several seizures. And the minute he had his first stroke, I put everything in storage and I moved back to Rochester, got him sorted out, and then had them move up to Maryland. I had been working on the Hill. I had been appointed.
By that you mean Capitol Hill,
Yes,
the government
yes,
of America
yes.
in Washington.
Right, and I had been appointed as the honorary ambassador of this country that most people have never heard of.
Yes.
Has a larger population than Iceland, 4 million,
Right.
probably the size of Belgium, and they're located in the northeast section of India.
I think we can see a map right now, and the position of the, there we have the little red dot there, that's the Nagaland region in the Himalayas.
The lower foothills of the Himalayas.
To the east, and of course the larger country there is India, and then the countries around are like Pakistan and Burma and Tibet, I think, is to the right there. So here we see a close-up, and Assam is right there next to Nagaland. I'm a lover of Assam tea, you know. Oh, I love it.
And Assam,
And there's Manipur, Mizoram, and these are all tribal regions. Tell us about those.
well, really what happened was when the British colonies had left India, the Naga people declared their independence one day before India declared their
This
independence
is like
from
1948 or something?
47.
47?
to the UN. And that part of the world had never agreed to join the Indian Union. So their history is a little bit unique comparing to the other northeastern states. And what happened was the British did not consult the Nagas because they were so remote, and they basically drew a map and said 2/3 goes to India, 1/3 goes to Burma. And then over the years, the Indian government, in order to divide and conquer, divided the Naga people into those 4 areas, which was that previous map. If we can go back to that previous map.
And we can see all the different regions
Right.
there.
They chopped up Nagaland and they divided it into 4 places. Nagaland, Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, and Manipur. And then there's a 3rd in Burma that we're not focusing on today because their major issue of conflict is with the Indian government. And unfortunately, this conflict is one of the oldest conflicts in the world.
Yes.
And over 300,000 Nagas have been raped, beaten, killed, tortured, hung
Oh.
upside down, used as target practice.
Oh my.
And we are pretty sheltered from knowing about the story, and there's 2 reasons. The first reason is they are under something called a restricted area permit.
Yes.
This was imposed by the British. Now, the British imposed this on the Indians. And when the British left, the Indians used the same law called the restricted area permit. So Nagas could not come in and out.
Right.
And you would have to, if you would try to get into Nagaland, it's not easy. You have to get a special inline permit.
Yes, yes.
So this happened in 1953 when the American Baptist missionaries, which originally evangelized the Nagas
Back in the 1800s.
in the mid 1800s, about helping them get their independence from India. The Americans encouraged the Nagas to get their independence, but what happened was, as they were getting involved in politics, the Indian government did not like that, and there was threats that if you get involved with their independence movement, all the other missionaries in other parts of India would ask to be leaving, would have to leave India. So this part of the world has been gated off from the rest,
Yes,
and there was God knows killings and horrific tortures happening there.
Yes, yes.
There's another law called the Armed Forces Special Powers Act of 1958. Again, the British started this type of oppression on the Indians when the Indians tried to gain freedom. When the British left, the Indians used the same law to oppress the Nagas.
Yeah.
This law is still in effect. And Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, there are many, many organizations that have said, in 2015, this is just unconscionable.
Yes, indeed.
Now, I started my position with the Nagas. I met the Nagas in 1998.
Where was that?
I had worked at the UN, and I also had a
In New York, United Nations
yes,
office, yes.
mhm. And I had an organization to help the homeless. And it was a welfare to work, transitional work program, Museum of Compassion, which is one of the 52 United Nations Peace Museums, on paper. But we had many, many exhibits working with the homeless. And my biggest exhibit of notoriety was for the 50th year Declaration for Human Rights in Geneva, Switzerland. And as we were taking down our exhibit, the Naga people were on the Subcommission for Human Rights for Indigenous People conference that was happening simultaneously. And he was walking by as I was taking down my exhibit, and he basically said, "Oh, you look like us, you need to help us." And I said, "Oh, I never heard of you people. I've never heard of Nagaland." He goes, "Oh, you look like us." And it turns out the Nagas are from Mongolia. Which Koreans are from Mongolia as well.
Roots.
Yes. And they migrated from Mongolia through China, through Burma, and actually, settled in the Burmese northeast area of India. Now, they look like me. They don't have any Indian features. And there are 16 major tribes, 66 minor tribes. English is their primary language because of the American Baptist missionaries. And in terms of their scores in education, they score higher because their English is better. And in fact, what's also interesting, and I don't mean to get off the topic here, is that when you do the outsourcing calls, quite often it's a Naga person answering because their English is better.
so good.
Hindi is not their primary language.
Right.
So they do very well in school. They're also very high tech. Some of the pictures that we have culturally, they have a deep culture, but actually they dress like you and me, and they do very well in terms of their education.
Yes.
And Koreans came from Mongolia through China and then settled in North-South Korea, which is now divided, but it was one country at the time. And anyway, these poor people have gone through quite a bit of struggle. It's been hard for me to go in to India. I raised a lot of awareness on the Hill. We were able to have 2 historic events in Congress. Congressman Burton, Dan Burton, who was chairman of international relations at the time, and the chaplain of our Congress, Daniel Coughlin, U.S. Ambassador John McDonald,
Yes.
two-term U.S. Ambassador under Carter, helped me.
And so you were lobbying.
Yes, I was lobbying, and we were able to have these events in Congress, and then a couple years later, they gave me the Cannon Caucus Building, which is even a larger venue in the Cannon Building, and we were able to historically raise the Naga flag with the American flag, and we had about 19 Naga dance troopers
Wow.
do a play about how they were oppressed.
Yeah.
And it raised quite a bit of awareness.
Yes.
And as that happened, I was a little bit persecuted by unknown
Right. Yes.
Indian figures,
Yes.
press, and it's still a mystery who.
Well,
But,
that happens politically, sadly.
Yes.
You know, the organizations will what we say rubbish your opponent,
Right,
trash the opponent.
right.
That's
And
very
it was quite scary at the time, and I had other things happen to me. Phone calls and my name trashed in the newspaper, and
yeah.
my visa was actually revoked, and I look forward to having under the new prime minister because he's much more focused on
Yes.
trying to work out this Naga condition.
Yes.
Out of all the other prime ministers, he has promised to, within 18 months, to help the Naga people.
That's the Prime Minister of India.
Yes, Prime Minister Modi.
And so he, and we'll come to that a little
Right.
later, I think.
Right.
And he is much more open
Yes.
to a friendly
Right.
approach.
Well, I think both sides have come to the belief that war is not the solution.
Right.
First of all, the Nagas are very different in terms of their landscaping. They are landlocked
Yes.
by mountains. And in a way, that's a blessing because their country is beautiful, just like Iceland, filled with beautiful mountainsides, very clean water,
Yes.
because it's all mountain water.
Yes. Yeah.
And because of the mountains, the weather is very nice, around 68 degrees.
Right.
Most of the portion, so it's cooled, while other parts of India is very hot and muggy.
Right.
So the Nagas are just kind of in a special little place.
Yes, and quite an elevation there.
Yes.
As you say, in the foothills of
Right.
Himalayas.
And they have a very deep culture. But what I was most taken, and the reason I got involved, was to find out they are 95% Christian.
Now, yes, how did that come about? That's very interesting.
That came about by the American Baptist missionaries going to Nagaland in the mid-1800s.
Right.
And all the school system is English. They follow the American
Yes.
school system.
Yes.
They are also have it on their vision to be one of the #1 missionary countries in the world.
Was
Now-
that missionary sending?
Yes, sending out missionaries. And you see they're sandwiched between India, which is Hindu, China, which is communist, Burma, which is Buddhist, and Bangladesh, which is Muslim. They're the largest pocket of Christians, 4 million, that are trained and ready
Yes.
to send out missionaries, but they can't leave because they're under this restricted area permit, which is a
Well, it's an
draconian.
injustice.
Yes,
Yes.
nobody in 2015 should be living under oppression, especially because India speaks about being the world's largest democracy.
Yes.
You know, but the Nagas have had it hard because, you know, India is a Hindu caste system. That's
Yes.
their thousands and thousands of years culture.
Right.
And
millions of gods.
yes, and you know, there's about 5 major castes.
Yeah.
The Brahmin caste, and then the lowest being the untouchables.
The Dalits.
Now, if you're an untouchable, you're the dark skin, which
Yeah.
really is half the population, 500 million and less, the last two rungs.
Yes.
And the Nagas fit as untouchables because they are minorities and they are Christians.
Yes.
So they get a double whammy in terms of being oppressed.
Yes.
But they have a rich culture and they're loving people. When we went there in 2005, just the whole country came out to celebrate. And they have gates. Is there a picture of that gate?
No, I don't think we have.
I have a picture
but
of a gate, I believe.
we
didn't have
that
oh.
picture. But
We-
there is a picture that we can see of how the town is built on
Yes.
the mountainside.
Yes.
And that's just so beautiful and
And
characteristic.
what's interesting is every major tribe, the church is the most important building, and they all pool their money. So their churches are nicer than American churches.
Right.
You can't believe it. I
Right.
mean, I didn't bring the pictures, but if you see the pictures of their churches, they're top rate,
Right.
gorgeous,
Yes.
and they pool all their money.
Yes.
They also follow American songs, even our contemporary songs.
Oh, really? The
And-
worship song.
Yes,
Wonderful.
and at 12 o'clock, the country stops to pray to Jesus.
Every day? Mm-hmm. Oh, my.
And the other interesting thing is, as you're driving through the mountainside, you'll see scriptures.
Right.
And on all the buses,
Yeah.
there's a picture of Jesus, and it says, Jesus saves. I mean, it's surreal.
We've got another picture of the countryside there. You can see how it's quite crowded, of course, with apartments.
Yes,
and,
there's the two major cities are Kohima and Dimapur.
right.
And they
Well, there's 4
They have
million
tin-
population, so
yeah, they have tin roofs,
yes.
but they also have the old-fashioned thatched roofs, and they're very well known for their weaving.
Right. And their
Every
clothes.
tribe has their own like uniform, kind of like
I think we have a picture of some of the traditional there you
Right.
have. And they have this beautiful, as you say, it's embroidered and woven.
and you can tell each tribe by their pattern, just like Scottish people have kilts.
Yes, that's right, the plaid.
Yes, you can tell by the Nagas, and that whole same tribe will wear that outfit.
Right.
So they're very famous for their weavings.
Yes. Yes.
And these are chiefs. They are wearing shells. Also, the shell kind of explains that they are of leadership.
right.
And
yes.
a lot of the clothing has symbols. Like some of the clothing have stripes.
Yes.
And you have to serve the poor for 7 years to be able to wear the 7 stripes
Right,
in
there's
your
a
clothing.
significance
And
to
then if
that.
there are shells, that means you're a leader. And if you're wearing the headdress, you're a real leader.
Right.
So these are some of the old timers.
Yes. Yes.
Now, what happened to us, which was very life-changing, is we were the first group in 2005 to go to an area of Manipur across the
Right,
state
yes.
from Nagaland into Manipur, into where there was major mass killings.
Oh.
Senapati and
Were they the
Matikur.
headhunters?
Yes, they were originally headhunters, just like the Scots were headhunters. And that was their way. And they went from headhunters to what they call soul hunters.
Now,
They're prayer warriors.
do you know how that happened? Or one of the stories I can tell you very well, because it was a Welshman named Watkin Roberts, who was born again in the Welsh revival, which was in 1904. And he said, Lord, send me to the worst people on earth. And he landed, first of all, in Calcutta, and then he went up the mountainside. The British military there said, well, you're on your own head be it. They're headhunters and they're going to take your head off. Well, he went and I think he was only there a week. But then he preached, and just a few young people. One was the son of the tribal chief came to the Lord, who later married, and his son, we've both met, Roshanga Podayati.
Oh, right.
And of course, he has started Bibles for the World. A great man. He's getting old now and living in America. But it was through that faithfulness of that young man that the Manipur and the Hamar peoples came to know the Lord. So that happened much later, but in the same region as the Nagas.
Yeah, their story is fascinating, and what's interesting is they keep their culture very close to their heart. They're very into their food, into their belief system is called Christian communism. Now, we hate that word communism, but what that means is a social caring for the community.
Well, that's what it says in the Bible, in the
Yes.
book of Acts.
Yes.
They had all things in common.
Right. And,
Yeah.
and throughout their, when any decision is made, it really has to go from a grassroots tribal level to voting. And things can take a little bit of time there because you have to get everybody on board. And their parliament house is all made out of thatched roof. I mean, the most beautiful, unusual weaving.
Yes.
And every gate for every tribe is different. And it's just a beautiful place to visit. Do you know tourism has gone up 40%? There is a time in the, once a year, called the Hornbill Festival, which happens the first week in December, which they actually allow people from many countries to come and visit for like that 1 week. They're a little bit open.
Yes.
The Indian government's open as well.
Yes,
and
yes.
people from all over the world come. And you'll see different tribes dancing in their clothes. But like I said, I want to reiterate, they dress like you and me. They're very into being westernized,
Very modern.
very much into the internet and computers, iPhones,
Yes, yes.
programming, just like India is very good at computer programming.
Yes.
They're catching up, and their English is just spectacular.
Yes.
These are highly educated people. When you look at tribal pictures, you tend to think, how can these people ever be free? You know, they look like headhunters. No, they're just getting dressed in their festivity clothes.
Yes.
Just like Native Americans do too. But they're highly educated people, and they have every wherewithal. The number one thing that's so interesting is they're a country rich with natural resources.
Oh, yes.
And they are oil rich.
Oh, my.
They are wealthy, very, very wealthy people.
Yes.
Most of their land is on oil. And because it's landlocked, you know, Assam, which is the second oldest refinery, that part of Nagas are there, and so are Indians.
Yes.
They've actually been, the Indian government has actually been slant drilling and sucking out their oil right from underneath them.
Right, across the border.
Right. So this new peace accord agreement, I think they're trying to figure out how everyone can benefit, because why keep people poor? You know, some people believe that money is the root of all evil. I don't believe that.
The love of money.
It's the love of money.
Yes.
That's in the Bible.
Yes.
And corruption.
Yes.
But money can buy new roads. Money can buy schools. Money can buy hospitals. Economic development is what they need, because they're between the most powerful nations. China, which has over 1 million people.
A billion.
Billion, sorry.
Yes.
And India, which has over 1 billion.
Yeah.
And those two economies are merging. It's called the Chindia economy. If you look up Wikipedia, that's a whole new technical term.
Right.
And that's because China is a manufacturing-based country. India is an outsourcing-based country.
Yes.
And these two economies are doing business together.
Yes, yes.
The monies will not be in America and Europe anymore. It is going to be in the Chindia economy.
Right.
And much has been written about this. But what's dead set in the middle between them? Nagaland.
Yes.
Nagalim.
Yes.
Now, I use Nagaland and Nagalim interchangeably. The lim is land in their language.
All right.
So the
Yes.
Nagas want to be called Nagalim.
Yes.
But on the British, the Indian maps, they call it Nagaland. That's just one of the 4 little states. But there are Nagas, like I said, in Arunachal Pradesh, which borders China, and China is a little bit claiming parts of that. Assam, which there are Nagas, but also part of India is there. And Manipur as well. But the Nagas just want their original territorial, historically,
Yes.
where their people migrated, they
Yes.
know exactly the boundaries.
And they have the right.
And they have the right, and in the Indian Constitution, which this current Prime Minister is recognizing,
Right.
there is a special provision in the Indian Constitution, Article 371-A. They have sole exclusive rights to their natural resources and oil.
Yes.
So this particular peace agreement is working out that issue.
Yes.
And if that does come to fruition, the Nagas will be wealthy
Yes.
if they are able to, work out a business agreement
Yes.
between China and India. You see, China and India fight
Yes.
and bid against each other when they go to Africa. Anywhere that there's oil, those two are always neck and neck, and China always wins. China always wins because they have the money.
We daren't say they're big bullies, but that's how it.
Well, they have the money. That's
Yes.
really the money.
Yes.
If China has 10 billion, India only has 5 billion, and they win the contract.
Right.
So it behooves the Indian government to see and to work in agreement with the Naga people
Yeah.
for economic development.
Yes.
And my goal, which I wrote in 2004 in a white paper, is that Naga would not just deal with their natural resources and also be in management of their natural resources and be the primary owner of their natural resources, is that they triple jump green technologies.
Right.
Just like they did in Singapore. Singapore was nothing, and then they were able to bring over all new technologies. And now look at Singapore. Iceland
Yes.
is not a third world country.
No.
They have all the top technologies.
Yes, that's right.
It can happen,
Yes.
But people need to work together and work, instead of thinking about war, think about how we can do business together and everybody win.
Yes.
It's a win-win proposition.
Yes.
War is never,
Yes.
there's always a price for war,
Yes.
as you know, which is
Yes.
human lives.
Yes.
And life is short.
It is.
So I think
absolutely.
this current Prime Minister Modi is understanding life is short.
Well, we'll come back in a moment and think about that situation. Today, friends, we have a really interesting program. My guest is Miss Grace Collins, who is a resident of the United States, born there and lives just close to Washington, D.C., the capital of the USA. And she's been sharing with us a fascinating story of a little-known people, the Naga people, who are squeezed between China and India and Burma, there as we saw on the map. And as we've been learning more, I want you to be praying and to be asking the Lord, how can you have an impact, and in what way? Well, I told you the story of Watkin Roberts. When he went out to that region, to another tribal group, the Hamas, and in the Manipur region. And now it seems that their time has come for all of these peoples who have been oppressed, as we've heard Grace telling us today. You know, I've got a little scripture. I always like to bring in some scripture, and I'm looking at Isaiah chapter 66. And although the initial application of these verses, of course, is to do with Jerusalem, rejoice, all people who love Jerusalem, be happy. I'm in verse 10 here of Isaiah 66. Those of you who feel sad for Jerusalem should feel happy with her. You see, there was a transition in the nation of Israel, and somehow history repeats itself, and that's happening again here in this region that we've been talking about, right in the middle of Asia, next to India, China, and Burma. And then, turning over, we read in the 16th verse, the Lord will judge the people with fire. He will destroy many people. But these people must make themselves holy and pure to go and worship. You see, we've got all of these people groups across the world, and these certainly, it seems, are the end times when things are happening in the world which are foretold in the scriptures. And we've only got to read our Bible in the prophetic sections, the Old Testament, and of course in the book of the Revelation. And we find that at the end time, things are quickening and nations are coming into their own. It says that these people will be saved, and the nations, these people, the nations will tell of my glory. Now that's a scripture that's tucked away back in the Old Testament there in the book of Isaiah, and yet is coming to pass today. The fact that nations are rising up and are honoring God. The Naga people, as Grace was telling us, they honor God every day, midday, and they go to church on Sunday and they worship the Lord. Grace, this is a fascinating story. So tell us more about your involvement as the honorary ambassador to these people.
Well, you know, it's funny how God can give you a job that you didn't apply for. And you could be considered the least qualified and broken. But God reveals himself.
God uses the weak things of this world.
Yes, and that would be me.
Yes, that's what the scripture says.
I took on this job when I actually had my own health condition. I could hardly walk. And I had to leave one job because of my health. And the Naga president called me, and he kept calling me. He would call me after I had met him in Switzerland at the UN. He would call me once a month, then he'd call me once every few weeks, then he'd call me once a week, then 3 times a day, then harass me, you know, to the point that he said he looked in the Bible and he read the word grace, and he felt that I was the one. And I said, well, there's plenty of people named Grace. That doesn't seem to be a good reason. No, we are convinced that you are the one to help us.
Yes.
But I did not have any background in human rights. I did not have any background in politics. I had no interest in politics. I had interest in the art. And I, again, was helping the homeless with a museum, showing their artwork, and I was promoting, you know, art. And I got an MBA from England, arts marketing.
Right.
From Durham.
Durham University.
And, you know, just am amazed when I see people's gifts and I want to promote them. But it's funny how God can take you completely out of that and put you in a job that you're like, why am I doing this? I don't want to do this. But every time when I tried to run away, he would put me right back in it. and he would open up the doors that you can't imagine. Many heads of state, many doors at the State Department, Department of Justice. I mean, these are not things that I had the connections for. I did not know how to lobby Washington. All I wanted to do was bring their artwork and say, Grace Collins was the first person to bring artwork from Nagaland to America. So I would contact churches, I would contact museums, and it just didn't really go anywhere. And I ended up starting to talk to congressmen. Well, when you start talking to congressmen, that's technically considered lobbying.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, I became their first paid employee. Everybody there is a national worker. They all volunteer. But you cannot live in DC on nothing.
No.
It's an extremely expensive country. I don't have rice to barter to get a cow. You know, I don't have a sheep to barter to get a parking spot. You know, parking spots in Washington, D.C. are anywhere between $22 and $33. So how was it possible that I could keep surviving 14 years, 6 years unpaid, and I guess I paid my dues, which they trusted me, and 8 years as a paid official?
Yes.
So the Nagas at the time were self-imposed exiles. They have offices in many countries, about 11 countries, but they have a home in Thailand and in The Hague and some other major countries. And a lot of little Nordic countries are very supportive.
In Norway?
Yes, are very supportive of the Naga cause.
We have a lot of viewers in Norway. In fact,
Yeah.
we've got the number on the screen there
Oh,
for our friends from Norway to phone in. And do phone in, friend, if you have a comment to make or if you want to pledge to the gospel channel, or if you want to say, well, I'm going to pray for the Naga people to really come into their own rights and to have justice at last. And pray for Grace, too, who is still, although you're not actually in that same formal position, yet your heart is still there for the Naga people.
I think my heart will always be for the Naga people. I mean, it was not a country I ever heard of, but I was so taken by the fact they're so devout Christians.
Yes,
I mean, we can learn from them. They could be a missionary to our country.
absolutely.
They pray for everything. They pray and fast for every single thing. And when I would go visit on all my trips, we always start with prayer. We have a Bible study. We pray before we eat. I mean, every meal. We spent a lot of time in prayer. So my walk was tested on so many times. And, you know, at times it was very hard. Sometimes when you're doing God's work, I don't know if that's called spiritual warfare, but many, many different things happened to me. But that all it did was stretch my faith. And I kept thinking, well, God has a reason for this. I must be here for some reason. I mean, there's 7 billion people in the world. You know, why would little old me from Rochester, New York, be asked to do this?
Yes, well, that's the calling of God.
Yeah, and you can't fight that. I mean, if you want to be here, but he places you here, that's where you go.
Yes.
And if you try to run away, he puts you right back there.
Like
So,
Jonah.
yeah.
He gets you back.
Yeah, so I wasn't particularly good at public speaking or anything, and you know, I just was like, what can little old me do? But I always believe that, you know, it starts with, what did Eleanor Roosevelt say? You know, never underestimate the power of a small group of committed people. Or
Yeah.
Margaret Mead also said that too. And, you know, we had a small group of interns working with me and volunteers, ancillary volunteers at times. But we got a lot accomplished
Yes.
on nothing.
Yes.
Very little budget.
Yes.
And people would say to me, you know, how did you get an event in Congress? I was like, I don't know. How'd you get that door open? I don't know.
Well, those were God things. as
God
we say.
things.
Yes.
I mean, he would just place people right on the airport sitting next to me. The
Right.
perfect person that I was supposed to meet. Or I'd
Yes.
fly to a country and, oh, why didn't I introduce you to the head of state? I mean, it just, he opened up all the doors. And I never had to work hard. I would just sit back and say, Lord, you know, what do you have for me today? And like I said, some days were hard. Some days I didn't understand why I was doing this. And, and then unfortunately in 2011, I had a health condition.
Yes.
And it seemed like all the doors were closing.
Right.
I needed that time for myself.
Yes. Yes.
And just slowly chop, 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 chop to nothing. And now, as of 3 weeks ago, I think we have a picture of it, the picture of Prime Minister Modi.
Now,
And
he's the Prime Minister of India.
India, yes.
Right.
And there he's wearing the red Naga shawl as a gift, which is a traditional gift.
Right.
And the current Prime Minister, Muiva.
In the suit.
Yes, and they have entered into a peace accord agreement. This is the
Right.
first major public recognition that he is wanting to work out this condition
Well, you
with
know,
the Nagas, and it's been in the news every single day.
and
Big news.
This is an answer to prayer.
It's an answer to prayer, but see, the Lord didn't need me then. He was like, you know, I had put a lot of weight on myself, you know, first helping the homeless and then helping the, and people are like, Grace, you can't put the whole world on your shoulder. God doesn't need you, you know. He will use you when he wants to use you, and he'll take you out when he wants to use you. But, you know, if he wants to open up that door again, he will use you. So I really don't know what God has for me.
Right.
But, you know, things are definitely happening in Nagaland, and we need to pray that the peace process continues.
Yes.
And that the international community gets involved. Because, you see, if it's not in the press, then people can backtrack and not really be
Right.
held accountable
Yes,
to their
yeah.
promises. So I decided to do this interview with you because I've known you over the years. You knew the president of Nagalim.
Yes, I met
You have
with him.
watched this story faithfully and studied it.
Yes, indeed.
And, you know, I've been on other shows that were by Indian people, and it was chopped up to not exactly what I said.
Well,
So I appreciate this opportunity
what you
to,
see is what you get
Yeah.
on the Gospel Channel. You know?
and I appreciate that. So I said, if I ever do an interview, I'll do it with Pastor Robin Reese.
And it's been our joy and a blessing for you to be with us here today, Grace. And our friends, as you have been watching, Grace Collins, who for many years was the honorary ambassador to the Naga peoples there in between India and China and Burma. A land of almost forgotten people, and yet a people who were faithful to God in their prayers, 98% believers. Well, I'm telling you, you know, the time comes when there's oppression, just like the nation, the people of Israel, were oppressed for 400 years in the land of Egypt. And then came their time of release, and they came into their own. And as we know, at about the same time as India became a nation, 1947, soon after it, in 1948, Israel, modern Israel, became a nation once again. And so all these things are happening around us. They are exciting times in which we live. And so you're able to send us a text. You've got the number there in the UK, 0752 061 5311. Send us an SMS text and just give us your thoughts on how we can help these people in these days. Because once they are free, and you heard Grace tell just a few weeks ago, how that the Prime Minister of India, as an answer to prayer, and as a result of the conscience of the Indian people who have oppressed these people in Naga and Manipur and Assam and that region, they now are coming to see that it's wrong and that justice must be done. And so they are coming into their own. And Grace, you were telling us how that these people, they are about to explode as missionaries with their good English understanding and to reach out to the nations around, Hindus, Buddhists, and the communists of China.
Yes.
That's
and
amazing.
Muslim.
And of course the Muslim.
They want to be an epicenter for Jesus Christ.
That is incredible.
That is their primary. If you would say that they're exporting of what they want to do, that's what they want to do. Which I mean, is just so heartfelt. I've never heard of anything like that. I mean, I guess America is the #1 missionary country, and then Korea. They like to follow a lot of Korean things. The young kids are super smart, beautiful. They're into fashion. It's one of the fashion hubs.
Yes.
They're into technology, but they follow many things of Korea. They love watching the Korean soap opera, and they want to be the next Korea. And they have the wherewithal.
Yes.
The only difference is, like I said, they're landlocked. But I said to them, you know, you're always interdependent. No nation is by themselves. You must work with your neighbors, you know, in a peaceful way. So they've come to understand that over the years. And I do want to put out another a favor of
Yes.
people's prayer.
Yes.
Is the president that I used to work for, President Isaac Chishi Shu, which you
Yes,
had
I
met,
with him, yes.
is very ill, and
Needs our prayers
he
right
needs.
now.
And I think this is one of the reasons the Prime Minister actually speeded up the peace talks, because he was
He has worked tirelessly.
yes, over 60 years.
Yes.
And he's not doing well. So it would be nice to give a special prayer for him,
Yes.
that he maintain his life
Yes.
without pain.
Yes. Yes.
I don't want to go into too much about his health, but we do need to lift him up in prayer.
Yes.
And it would be his dream, I think, to see his people free before he
passes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
what an honor that would be.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing is the Nagas fought side by side in World War I and World War II with the Allied forces,
Right.
you know, America and the British.
Yes.
And they have a beautiful memorial thanking
Yes.
the Americans and the British and the Allied forces
Yeah.
against the Japanese occupation.
Yes.
It's one of the prettiest places in Nagaland. So if you ever get a chance to visit,
Yes.
and like I would suggest, the Hornbill Festival, which is the first week in December, is to go over there. And you can visit these sites, and you would be shocked
Yes.
at the amount of development. And it's so remote. You know, you drive 5-6 hours, see nothing, and then there's this village of people there. So it's a fascinating place.
Yeah.
All these, you know, Himalaya walkers and Nepal, and, you know, everybody's done it all.
Yeah.
You haven't been to Nagaland.
Right.
And I suggest, if you haven't been to Nagaland, that is the place to go. Thank you so much.
Yes. Well, Grace, thank you for sharing your own experiences, and through some trials too, I know, and yet, you know, there's nothing accomplished in this life without a struggle. I remember when we had our children as a young family. My eldest daughter, we were reading from Character Sketches, a book from America by Bill Gothard, and there was a picture of the little Cecropia moth, who the child helped to come out of the cocoon, And because that child helped that little moth to come out, it didn't fill its wings. The capillaries of its wings weren't filled, and so its life was cut short. You see, it was the struggle of that creature to come out of that chrysalis, and then with that struggle, just come, fill its wings and fly. And that's how Grace has been in her life and her endeavors. She has struggled, and you will find struggles in life too. But know this, that as a result of those struggles, like that little moth, then you will just open up and be able to soar with wings in the plan of God for your life. So we want to thank you for watching our program today. Grace, I want to thank you for coming to join us. Thank you so much for sharing all that you have. And we look forward to you sharing some more in a future program, more of your experiences and what you're doing now up to date. Thank you, dear friends, for watching our program today. God bless you. Until next time.